Salaryman gets reincarnated as a noble with the unique appraisal skill. In a certain city, people were going about their everyday routine. A man just came home from work, so he decided to cool off by playing some video games. The next day, as he steps out heading to work, he immediately has a cardiac arrest, and he becomes unconscious. He suddenly wakes up in another world to the sound of voices. He opens his eyes to see a lady standing in front of him, and he wonders who she is. The man wonders if he was somehow rushed to the hospital by a good Samaritan and the lady was the nurse on duty. He looks around and he thinks the hospital looks old. A dog starts barking, but it flies across the man's field of vision, and the man is surprised to see a flying dog. A maid comes into the room with a tray to tell the lady her tea has been set, and the lady thanks the maid. The maid tells the lady her son is cute, and the man gets a look at his reflection on her tray. He can't believe he's now a baby, and he wonders if he was dreaming. He was born in the 200th year of the Summerforth calendar, and he was named Ars Luvent. He was born in Lamberg, which is in the province of Mission. 3 years later, Ars has now grown considerably. He was in the study when a maid knocked on the door, and he invited her in. She tells him she brought him some tea, and he thanks her for it. He realized that he lost his life in his previous world, and he was reincarnated as someone named Ars Luvent. Since his birth, he was able to master reading and writing skills, which made him knowledgeable about the new world. He knows he was born in the Summerforth Empire, but he had never seen a map like that, which made him realize he was no longer on Earth. He also discovered there was a technique known as magic that people use to conjure mysterious phenomena. He thought the world was just like a game. The Luvent family he was born into was a noble household, and they were in charge of managing a small region called Lamberg. Their house was so big and beautiful that Ars thought it was a castle. They had a lot of servants to always look after them, and a live-in chef who made delicious meals for them every day. Ars was glad he was reincarnated into such fortune. Since his birth, he also learned that he possessed a power that nobody else did. Ars walks into the training room, which surprises all the soldiers. He greets them and asks them if he can watch them from the safety of the entrance. The soldiers tell him he'll be fine at such a distance. They are surprised the prince was always coming to the training room at such a young age. They were convinced he would be a great warrior when he grew up. Ars walks over to a master teaching a trainee soldier. The master knocks the trainee down and he scolds him, but the trainee gets back up and decides to have another go. Ars uses his appraisal skill on the trainee to look at his stats. He realizes the trainee has great aptitude in archery, and he figures out that the trainee will be good with bows. The master knows the trainee back, and the trainee looks exhausted. Ars approaches Millet the trainee and calls out to him, which surprises Millet because he didn't think Ars knew his name. Ars asks him if he's ever used a bow, but Millet tells him he will never use such a weapon because a real man doesn't shoot his enemies from a safe distance like a wuss. Ars tries suggesting that he may be able to handle a bow very well, and he asks him to try it. Millet chews on his thoughts, but when other soldiers ask him to try it just as Ars suggested, he decides to give it a shot. Millet picks up a bow and arrow, but he confesses that he's never shot one before. A soldier suggests he goes closer to the target to reduce the risk of hurting others, but Ars is confident he can hit the target from his position. Millet notches the arrow and he aims the bow at the target. He lets the arrow fly and it hits the bullseye. They think it was pure dumb luck, so they ask him to try again. Millet shoots several arrows and they all hit the bullseye. All the soldiers around him tell him he was born to be an archer, and Millet conveniently realizes that using a bow isn't so bad since all is fair in war. The soldiers wonder how Ars was able to figure out that Millet will be good with a bow, and he tells them it was his instinct. The soldiers are impressed by this, but Ars knows if he told them the truth about his appraisal skill, they wouldn't believe him. Though his ability was the real deal, he was not able to use it on himself, which he wasn't very happy about. During dinner time, Ars was impressed with the meal prepared by the chef. He was about to dig in when his father called out to him. His father tells him he was informed of how Ars discovered Millet's talent with a bow, and he was impressed. Ars was a bit scared of his father because he always looked so angry. Ars uses his appraisal skill to look at his father's stats. He was impressed that his father was able to rise from a farmer to a noble using his martial arts prowess. His father tells him to hone his instincts because he could become the lord of the land one day. His father was convinced the ability to detect other people's talent would be useful to him in the future. His father offers him his portion of the dinner so he can grow up quicker, and Ars thanks him for that. After that day, Ars studied more about the empire, and he realized that the future was a bit vague because the leaders were corrupt. Several revolts were coming up amongst the commoners, and various nobles were focusing on autonomy to quell the revolts. Ars feared that the Empire might enter an all-out war if things don't change for the better. He couldn't envision himself leading his troops to war, and he wonders if he'll be able to keep the people of Lamberg safe. He wanted to protect them because they were so kind to him. He remembers his father's words about his instincts, and he immediately gets an idea. He wears a costume, and he goes out on the streets. He immediately uses his appraisal skills to check out the stats of the people in the town. He is exhausted after using his skill for a long time, and he sits in an alley. A woman suddenly chases a man out of her shop because she doesn't want to sell her goods to him. Ars figures out that the man doesn't look like the people in his town. A boy points at the man who is a Malkin, and he tries to get his mom to help him, but everyone avoids him because he's filthy. Ars remembers that the Malkin are a group of people that came to Summerforth from across the sea. He knows that most of them were brought in as slaves, so he decides to offer the man his bread. Everyone wonders why the heir to House Luvent is helping a Malkin. The man takes the bread and he begins eating with tears rolling down his face. Ars uses his appraisal skill on the man, and he's surprised to see that his stats are almost perfect. He knows that the man can become a great warrior, but the man gets up to leave after thanking him for the bread. Ars chases after him, but the man tells him not to follow him because the people of the town will be angry. Ars asks the man if he'll want to become his retainer, which surprises the man. Ars was planning to use his ability to recruit people with potential so his domain will become stronger. The man thinks Ars just want him to pretend, but Ars introduces himself and shows him his family crest. The man is surprised, but Ars tells him he wants him to become his retainer because he senses he has a lot of talent. The man wonders how Ars was able to sense that when they just met, but Ars tells him it's just something he knows. The man tells him he doesn't want to cause him any trouble because people won't like him taking a Malkin as his retainer. Ars tells him not to worry about that because he'll think of something, but the man rejects his offer and walks away. Ars keeps chasing after the man because he knows he may never find someone else with such stats. The man's stomach growls and Ars decides to use that as leverage. He tells the man they have a chef who can make him a buffet of the food he'll love to eat. The man stops in his tracks and he decides to follow Ars home. Ars takes him home, and he can't believe Ars is truly the son of the Lord. The chef serves them some food, but they serve the man a smaller portion because he's a Malkin. They tell the Malkin to leave their house immediately after his meal, and Ars realizes the prejudice against Malkins runs very deep. He realizes he won't be able to talk the servants out of it, so he decides to share his food with the man, which surprises everyone. The maids decide to serve the man a better dish, and he eats to his fill. Ars wonders what Rates, the Malkin, was doing in the village, and Rates tells him he was once a member of a band of mercenaries. He tells Ars they disbanded after most of them lost their lives, and he's been wandering ever since. Ars wonders why he didn't join another mercenary group, and Rates tells him he wasn't hired because he didn't have any accolades to his name. The servant suggests that it's time for Rates to leave, but Ars tells them he brought Rates home to make him his retainer. The servants tell him that Lord Raven will disapprove, but Ars takes the matter to him anyway. His father tells him it's unacceptable to make a Malkin his retainer, but Ars tells him they'll waste Rates' potential if they throw him out. His father reminds him that Malkins are inferior to them, so no Malkin can have any special talent. Ars is disappointed that his father believes the conventional information about Malkins, but he tries to convince him otherwise. He asks his father to test Rates if he likes, and his father wonders why he's so sure of his talent. His father remembers he discovered melee talent, and he decides to test Rates since Ars insists. He tells Ars he'll employ Rates as a soldier if he turns out to be talented, and Ars thanks him for this. His father tells him the test will be a mock battle between him and Rates will be employed if he's able to beat him. Ars tries to convince his father that Rates is no match for him because he's so young, but his father reminds him that he said Rates was talented. His father decides to give Rates a handicap to make up for the difference in prowess, and he tells him they can proceed since he understands the terms. They walk out of the room, and Rates wonders why Ars is trying so hard to make him his retainer. He thinks Ars is showing him pity, but Ars wonders if he doesn't want to become their retainer. He tells him he can call it off if he wants, but Rates tells him it's the best offer he's received in his life. He thinks the offer is unbelievable because Malkins are usually persecuted everywhere they go. Ars tells him he needs him because he's going to become the lord of the land one day, and he'll need Rates by his side. Rates assures him that he'll do his best. Rates goes into the training room, and the soldiers realize he's a Malkin. Ars' father asks Millet to prepare their swords, while Gratz brings an hourglass. He tells Rates to pick up a sword, and he tells him if he can land a single blow on him before the time runs out, he wins. Ars thinks Rates has the odds in his favor. Ars' father tells Rates to introduce himself before they duel, and after Rates does so, he introduces himself as Lord Raven. The duel begins and Lord Raven strikes first, but Rates gets out of the way in time. He's convinced he'll have been sliced in half, even if they're using practice swords. The duel continues and Ars realizes that Rates doesn't stand a chance, but the soldiers are surprised that he's able to hold his sword against Lord Raven. Though Rates was keeping up with Lord Raven, he was not able to land a hit on him. Lord Raven lands a hit that sends him to the ground, but he gets back up. Lord Raven reminds him that he has little time left and Rates remembers Ars saying he needs him. He decides to go all out and he rushes at Lord Raven. He slides under and then uses the sunlight to his advantage to try to land a hit on Lord Raven, but he blocks just in time. Lord Raven announces that the battle is over, but Rates looks back to see the hourglass still running. Everyone realizes that Rates was able to graze Lord Raven, and they wonder who he is. True to his word, Lord Raven decides to employ him as a soldier and Ars runs over to congratulate him on his employment. Lord Raven tells Ars his ability to sense people's prowess is top tier, and that he's confident Ars will fare well in the upcoming chaotic age. He's confident Ars will make a great lord someday. Meanwhile, all the soldiers wonder how Rates became so strong, and they flock around him hoping to learn his secret. Later that day, Rates changes into his new clothes, and he promises to repay his debt to Ars with his life. It has been several months now since Rates began working in the Luvent house. He trained with the soldiers each day, and all the soldiers were amazed by his skills. Though he was partaking in the war, he always stayed beside Ars. His intelligence skyrocketed after he started taking lessons, and after some time Ars used his appraisal ability on him. He was impressed to find out that Rates was now the most intelligent person in their house. Everyone quickly accepted Rates after they got to know him more and saw how gifted he was. The maids in the house were pleased to have him around, and they were also impressed by his skills and intellect. Rates approaches Ars and he asks him for a new lesson for that day. Ars agrees to help him study. Rates reminds Ars that their previous lesson covered the activities of the Summerforth Empire, whose aim was to reunite the 7 original nations. Rates recalls that Ars told him that Ansel, which is geographically isolated from the other regions, was involved in commercial activities with regions outside Summerforth. They did this to gain enough power to invade the other kingdoms in the Summerforth region. After Ansel conquered the other regions, the king of Ansel declared himself as the emperor, and he named the region Summerforth. This was 203 years ago, and Ars confirms all that he has said. Rates continues, saying the current Summerforth Empire is in decline because the current emperor is only 8 years old. This meant that his vassals were the ones with actual power, since the emperor was going to rule on his own. This bred corruption amongst the government, which led to revolts around the country. This made the dukes of each duchy ignore the empire as a whole and focus on autonomy. Though the current warfare isn't very intense, Ars is convinced there will be more severe conflict down the road since his father is already forced to fight in the current conflict. Ars decides to use his ability to gather promising talents and prepare them for battle, even though he hopes that war doesn't break out in the future. Ars wonders where war will break out in the future, and Rates tells him it will probably start from the Mission region. He informs Ars that the Duke of the Duchy of Mission is very old and likely to meet his maker very soon. The Duke has 2 sons, and though the eldest is supposed to succeed him when this happens, the younger son seems more capable. The Duke was worried about who to pick as his successor in the case of his demise. Rates is sure that war will break out if the Duke gives up the ghost before he decides his successor war will break out. He's also sure war will break out regardless, even if the Duke decides, because both sons are power hungry. Ars can't believe his ears, and he wonders who his father will side with if such an occurrence takes place. Rates informs him that his father will likely side with the eldest son, but he knows it's not his father who will make the choice. Ars realizes his father isn't a direct vassal to the Duke of the Duchy of Mission, because he's a vassal of the Kennar head, which is where Lamberg falls in. Ars realizes his appraisal ability could be useful in deciding who to side with if a war breaks out. Ars was worried because, though his father is still alive, he was only a kid, and since he has only been able to scout Rates, he didn't want his father to fall in the minority. Rates tells Ars a lord can advance in rank if they play a big part in an active war. Rates sees that as a reason for them to continue doing their best to increase their strength, and he reassures Ars that he'll always be around to protect him. Rates realizes they need to scout for capable people, and he asks for Ars' assistance. Ars agrees to help him search for talented people, and Rates promises to accompany him. Ars and Rates walk out of the family house, and Ars is surprised to see his father out practicing. He noticed that his father has been practicing swordsmanship lately, and he wonders if his father is aware that a war is about to break out. Lord Raven notices Ars, and he wonders if Ars is going into town. Ars informs him that he's going to look for outstanding talent, and his father advises him to look out for someone good with magic. Ars is surprised by this, but Lord Raven tells him magic will be useful in the upcoming war. Lord Raven isn't very good at magic, and he is aware that many vassals possess magic, but they're not very good at it. Reitz realizes that there could come a time when such a mage could change the tide of war. Ars remembers a time when he cast magic because his father asked him to. Then, he wore a strange tool with a ball of red liquid, and he recited a short incantation, but his magic was a sight for sore eyes. After that, his father never allowed him to cast magic again, and Ars made peace with the fact that he has no magic talent. Lord Raven tells he's counting on him to find a person with magic talent, and Ars promises to do his best. They take a horse to go into town, and Reitz is convinced their strength will increase greatly if they can find someone with enough magic talent to be useful in battle. Ars decides to look for someone with such talent for the sake of the future of his home. They arrive at the fortified city in Canar, and Ars is surprised by the number of people on the street. Reitz informs him that the city is home to 50,000 people, and Ars is shocked because that's 5 times the people in Lamberg. He points out the Canar castle, and he tells Ars the castle is home to the Pales family, which is the county chief's family. Ars notices a lot of wealthy people on the streets, and he hopes the people of Lamberg can one day live like that. Ars decides to use his appraisal skill, and he looks around trying to find someone with outstanding talent. After a while, Ars and Reitz sit at a fountain, and Ars is bummed out because he couldn't find anyone with outstanding talent. A person's ability values are divided into numbers and competency. So no matter the number value, without competency, a person cannot perform well. Reitz reassures him that they still have time to find someone with talent since they just begun their search. While Reitz is following the city map, Ars stops by an alleyway with beggars. Reitz is telling him about a landmark, but he notices Ars looking at something else. He approaches Ars, and he looks into the alleyway. He informs Ars that there will always be beggars as long as there are rich people. Reitz acknowledges that saying such a thing is wrong since Ars saved him from such a life, but he tells Ars they can't do anything for the people. Ars agrees with Reitz, but he tells Reitz his perspective of the city has changed after seeing people living in such conditions. He tells Reitz he wants to make a society where there's no discrimination between the rich and the poor. Though he admits the naivety in his ambitions, he tells Reitz he believes there's talent in everyone. Reitz admits that he's proud to serve Ars, which makes Ars very surprised. A strange character who was spying on them walks away. They arrive at the largest market in Canar, and Ars is surprised by how much food he can set his eyes on. A trader tries to convince him to buy a dragon egg so he can have it as a pet. Ars is surprised that dragons exist, and he's even more baffled that they can be domesticated. Ars is taken in by the trader's bargains, and the trader tells him the rare eggs are worth 1 silver coin each. Like someone under genjutsu, Ars tells the trader to give him 3 dragon eggs, and he rummages through his bag for money. Reitz isn't fooled by the trader, and he wonders why the trader sells fakes to people. He interrogates the trader with a sword, and the trader tries to feign innocence, but Reitz is having none of that. Reitz knew the city was no longer in trade with the continent where eggs could be found. He tells the trader the eggs aren't genuine because the dimensions and color are not the same as the ones he read about in books. He's convinced that the eggs are lizard eggs that the trader made out to be dragon eggs, but the trader denies it. Reitz is about to take the life of the trader for trying to fool Ars, and the trader begins saying his last prayers. Ars intervenes and begs Reitz to spare the trader because he is not buying the eggs anymore. Reitz apologizes for acting without caution, but Ars thanks him for saving him from being scammed. He wonders if the other trader will fool him just like the egg trader. He decides to become more knowledgeable so Reitz doesn't end up ending someone's life. They decide to keep looking for talent, but they take a lunch break after a while. Reitz cautions Ars to eat slowly as he hands him a steak, but he suddenly notices a stall selling candy. He rushes over with some money, and he asks the vendor to give him some, but someone bumps into him and relieves him of the weight of his pouch of money. Ars doesn't notice this, and he thinks the person bumped into him by accident because he appeared to be in a hurry. Reitz informs him that his pouch has been stolen, and he assures him he will catch the thief. He carries Ars on his back, and he begins chasing after the thief. The thief was the strange person who was spying on them earlier. Reitz gets close to the thief and takes off her disguise. The girl runs into an alleyway, and Reitz follows him into the alleyway. The thief is suddenly surrounded by bandits, and the boss beats the little thief for trying to run away. Ars tries to intervene and stop the men from hitting the girl, but the boss is pissed off by his presence. He tries to attack Ars, but Reitz blocks his attack and attacks him. He takes down the boss, and the henchmen decide to attack Reitz. Reitz takes them down one after the other, and they turn tail and flee. Ars wonders if the girl is alright, and he uses his appraisal ability on her. He discovers that she has an S-tier mage ability and a very high prowess. He sees that the girl is named Charlotte, and he's surprised by her abilities despite her young age. Ars realizes that her magical power is off the charts, though she's not very skilled in other combat forms. Reitz approaches Charlotte and tells her to return Ars's pouch, but Ars asks her to become his vassal. Reitz is shocked by this because he thinks she's just a common thief, but Ars informs him that her magic talent is phenomenal. Charlotte refuses his offer because she doesn't want to work for a kid of his status, and Ars is shocked. He tries to convince her to lend him her powers, but she tells him she's never used magic before. Ars tells her he can see she has an impressive magic ability, and he also realizes that she steals because she has a difficult life. He tells her she could live a better life if she becomes his vassal, and she tells him that's an opinion from a noble man's standpoint. She wonders why the nobles always look down on people like her. She tells Ars she won't be a tool to protect his luxurious life, but Ars tries to convince her that he's not like other nobles. He tells her his dream is to make a city where people can live with peace of mind and without fear of discrimination. Charlotte tells him she can't wait for him to create such a utopia if he isn't sure of the day. She thinks he's trying to hire her just to make himself look good, so she refuses his offer once again. Reitz tells her to return the pouch she stole, and she cooperates because she doesn't want to remain in their debt since they saved her. Ars wonders who the men were, and Charlotte tells him they are henchmen of some slave merchants she escaped from. Ars tries to convince her to run farther away, but she tells him she can't, and Ars wonders why. Suddenly, several children come running to welcome Charlotte. Reitz wonders who the kids are, and Charlotte tells them they are orphans living in the alleyway, just like her. She tells them she can't just leave the kids like that, so Ars decides to give her his pouch. Later in the day, Ars sits on a bench outside his room. Reitz tries to convince him to come into the room because it's cold outside, but Ars doesn't move. Reitz tells Ars he can empathize with Charlotte because he was once like her. He informs Ars that Charlotte has probably suffered at the hands of nobles, and that's why she thinks that all nobles are the same. He reassures Ars that he's different, but Ars tells him he took his privilege for granted. Ars tells Reitz Charlotte was right about him. Suddenly, he sees the orphans running through the streets and calling out to Charlotte. Ars goes out to meet them, and they inform him that Charlotte was caught. The thugs throw Charlotte on the ground at their base, and they beat her up for making their jobs a lot harder. They keep beating her, but Charlotte has since lost her feeling, which pisses off the thugs because she doesn't cry or call out to anyone for help. The leader of the thugs warns his underlings to lay off beating Charlotte because she already has a buyer and he doesn't want to taint her face. He informs them that he doesn't want to get on his customer's bad side, and the thugs agree to stop beating Charlotte. They suddenly notice a pouch next to Charlotte, and they think it's one of the pouches she stole from people on the streets. They pick up the pouch, and they notice it contains a lot of money, but Charlotte takes the pouch back and tries to run away. The thugs catch up to her and suppress her, trying to prove that she won't be getting away from them. Charlotte remembers the faces of the children in her care and all the things the money in the pouch can do for them. The thug leader informs her that there's no use running because all that awaits her is a life of misery. He tries to convince her to accept her new reality and put all the blame on her parents who abandoned her, but someone suddenly takes down the thug guarding the door. The door breaks in, and the thugs wonder who's interfering with their business. Reitz walks into the room, and the thug recognizes him from their fight in the alley. The things try to take Reitz down, but he takes down whoever rushes at him. The thug leader decides to stop the remaining thugs to stop engaging Reitz, and Ars rushes in wondering if Charlotte is okay. She wonders what he's doing at the thug's base, and the thug leader can't believe Ars is so confident that he can get away scot-free after breaking down his door. Ars uses his appraiser ability to reveal the thug leader's name as Albert, and he wonders if he's a slave trader. Albert is surprised that Ars recognized him, and he figures out that Ars is a noble. Ars orders him to release Charlotte, but Albert informs him that he can't because Charlotte is merchandise to him. He tries to make Ars understand because he thinks he's like the other nobles who buy slaves from him. Ars approaches him and tells him he's not like other nobles. Charlotte asks him to back down, wondering why he's standing up for her, though he hardly knows her. Ars suddenly asks her why her eyes look so empty because it's been on his mind ever since he met her. Ars uses his appraisal ability on her, and he notices that her ambition score is 1. Albert wonders what Ars is talking about, and Ars explains to him that someone's ambition is the person's hopes for themselves. It represents a desire to improve and hope for the future. Ars explains that Charlotte has given up on her future, and that's why her ambition score is just 1. Ars wonders if Albert can imagine anyone sadder than someone who's lost all hope for their future. Albert laughs it off because he knows that Charlotte is a slave and slaves don't have a future. Ars wondered why Albert is laughing when he's supposed to be an adult that protects children's future, but he chose to steal Charlotte's own away from her. He's pissed that Albert still dares to laugh about that because they've taken away Charlotte's ability to decide her future. Charlotte remembers when she sat depressingly in an alleyway, trying to remember the last time she shed tears. She realized that crying doesn't help her solve anything, nor does it improve her probability of survival. Charlotte gave up on her dreams after she realized that people's destinies are determined the moment they are born. Charlotte closed her heart to the world to prevent them from hurting her with their glaring stares and their condescending looks. Charlotte resorted to stealing after realizing that crying is for the weak, and that will leave her vulnerable to the world. She decided to focus solely on survival and do her best to do strong so she never had to cry. Charlotte now wonders why her eyes are letting down streams of tears after she vowed never to shed a single tear again. One of the thugs didn't like the tone Ars was using for Albert, and Albert decides to call down more of his underlings. He admits that he gave Ars some leniency because he's a noble, but now he's had enough of his insolence. Charlotte tells Ars to run to safety, but Ars assures her that he'll take care of everything and she'll be okay soon. Ars tells Reitz to dispose of the thugs, but the thugs hardly give him time to finish his sentence before they rush at him. Reitz makes quick work of the first thug, asking them if they know the grave offense they've committed. He informs them that the payment for angering Ars is their lives, but they decide to surround him and take him down at once he's only one person. They all rush at him one by one, but he takes them down successively. Albert signals to his mages to take down Reitz, but he nullifies their magic with his sword and defeats them. Albert is now at a loss of words after realizing that Reitz is a monster. Charlotte is surprised by how strong Reitz is that she has some confidence that they could. Reitz wonders if Albert is done or if he still has more men to sacrifice for his ego. Albert calls down his secret weapon from upstairs, and the huge thug comes down the stairs, wondering why everyone is so noisy. Albert informs them that the huge thug was once a captain in the Cannar army, but he was kicked out for bad behavior. Charlotte is surprised by how huge the thug is, and she informs Ars that they can't take him down. Ars uses his appraisal ability on the thug, and he tells Sikii to rest easy after going through the thug's features. The huge thug is surprised that the other thugs lost to someone as puny as Reitz, but Reitz tells him he can only make fun of them if he succeeds in taking him down. The huge thug promises to take the weight of his head off his body, and he tries to grab at Reitz, but he only grabs air. He wonders if Reitz disappeared into thin air, but Reitz is hanging on a chandelier, and he mocks him for being so slow. Reitz makes the thug eat his boot, and when he recovers, he makes him see butterflies with a strong punch to his jaw, which takes him out. Charlotte wonders how Reitz is so strong, while Albert mourns his fallen soldiers. Albert warns that Ars's actions will anger the headman of the Cannar district because he approves of slave trading. Ars is aware of that, so he decides to pay for the purchase of Charlotte. Albert is adamant about taking the money, but Reitz reminds him that the slave trade is built on trust. Albert wonders what Reitz is getting at, and Reitz informs him that if they take Charlotte away without paying, it would ruin his reputation. He suggests that he informs his buyer that someone came up to him with a better piece, so they don't have to resort to unethical measures to ensure Charlotte's safety. Albert gives in, telling Reitz to take her, and Reitz is so glad that Albert is cooperating that they decide to throw him some extra to cover for his troubles. Ars appreciates Reitz for his effort because things worked out just the way he said they would. Reitz informs Ars that he's honored, as always, to be in his service. They both walk over to Charlotte, and Ars offers her his hand to help her up so she can go back to her friends who are waiting for her. Charlotte reluctantly agrees, but when they come out of the thug's base, Charlotte informs them that there's somewhere she would like to go before they return home. Charlotte leads them through a thick forest, which tires Ars, who can't wait till they get to their destination. Charlotte is amused by how vulnerable Ars looks, but after a short distance, she announces that they have arrived at their destination. Ars looks up to see a beautiful view of the town from a rock, and Charlotte informs him that that's her secret spot. Whenever she takes in the view from the spot, all the problems that the town presents fade into oblivion. She always goes to the spot to take in the view from time to time just to keep her sanity because she likes the place. Ars wonders why she would share her special spot with him, and Charlotte reminds him about his dream to build a town where underprivileged people are treated just like nobles. She wonders why he has such a dream, and he tells her it's because he likes children, a statement that would land him in jail if he was in his previous life. Charlotte wonders why he's saying that even when he's a child, and Ars remembers images from his last life. He informs her that a child's smile can lift one's spirits when they are down because a child's smile is so full of hope. They both take in the view from Charlotte's special spot one last time. The next day, Reitz and Ars are hanging out with the children as they play around. The orphans talk about their dreams for their future, and Ars is pleased that the children have hope for what the future may bring. Ars is convinced that happiness holds great power, and the children's smiles can also influence the adults to get excited for the future and try to live a better life. Ars is convinced because that kind of enthusiasm can make a city a better place. Ars stares into the distant horizon, hopeful that he can build a place where children will always have hope. He informs Charlotte that such a responsibility can only fall on the shoulders of the leader of the city. That's why he wants to build a town where people like her can live stable lives. Ars suddenly realizes that he sounds like he's lecturing her, and he apologizes for this. He admits that he was caught up in the moment because he's so passionate about his dreams. To his surprise, Charlotte agrees to go with him and become his retainer. Ars wonders if Charlotte won't worry about the children, but she informs him that the children are the reason she's going with him. She informs him that she wants them to have a future similar to the one he's describing, and Reitz decides to confirm her magic ability using a magic item. Ars wonders where he got the item from, and he informs Ars that he borrowed it from a house they visited. Reitz hands Charlotte the magic item so she can test her magic because he wants to see her magic ability for himself so he can fully take her as a comrade. Charlotte confesses that it's her first time using magic and she doesn't even know how to cast spells. Reitz decides to show her how to cast a spell while Ars looks on with anticipation, wondering what someone with an S-rank aptitude is capable of. Reitz informs him that she's ready, and she says the incantation that Reitz told her. A huge fireball suddenly manifests in her outstretched palm, and a flame bursts into the air. To the surprise of Reitz and Ars, people in the town are also surprised by the spell. The magic item breaks from the magic overload, and Charlotte is happy with the power of her spell. Ars is amazed by Charlotte's power, while Reitz is so dazed by her magic that he barely manages to squeeze out a compliment from his mouth. Charlotte wonders if she'll get food and a place to live once she becomes Ars's retainer. He informs her she'll get all that, including a monthly salary, but she asks him to send her salary to the children because they'll have a hard time getting along without her. She informs him that all she needs is food and a place to live, and Ars promises to give her salary to the orphanage. Ars informs her that he's enthusiastic about her future. Charlotte prostrates and promises to do all she can to make his dream come true. Ars tells her she doesn't have to be so formal, and she decides to do away with it because she's not very good with fancy talk. Ars informs her that they need to head back home since they've gotten what they want and they're running out of money. Charlotte immediately apologizes for stealing their money, and she thanks them for saving her from the thugs. Ars tells her not to worry about it, but Charlotte didn't imagine she would one day be a retainer to someone younger than her. She tells Reitz she's more interested in Ars's future, and Reitz agrees with her. The next day, Charlotte goes to say goodbye to the orphans, and Ars is glad that he now has another dependable companion. Though he was glad that his house was now stronger, he was also feeling the pressure of having amazing people around him while being completely normal. Ars decides to stick to his dream and try his best to achieve it. On their way back, they stop to take some snacks, but Reitz notices that Charlotte has bad table manners. He informs her she'll have to learn it if she wants to remain as Ars's retainer, but she tells him it's impossible. They arrive home, but Lord Raven refuses to acknowledge Charlotte as Ars's retainer because the battlefield isn't fit for a woman. Ars asks Charlotte to demonstrate her power to Lord Raven, and after seeing the result, he immediately accepts her into House Luvent. 3 years later, Ars welcomes his father back home and explains that their domain lies in the Kanar district, and because of it, they've been dealing with land disputes with the neighboring province. Therefore, his father has been dispatched there several times to solve the conflict. Despite losing some men, everyone's spirits are still high. Ars runs to his father and asks how the battle went. His father explains it was pretty easy to win, especially because Charlotte had the chance to use her magic. He welcomes her and explains that due to her insane magic talent, Charlotte was able to quickly get famous and became one of the most feared mages. She even received the title of Luvent's Lady of Flames and became the pride of his house's mage corps. Ars couldn't even believe that one person talented could make a huge change. But now he realizes how important a skill can be. Suddenly, his mother appears, and Ars reveals there's one last news from the past 3 years. He now has a little brother and sister twins. His father checks on his siblings, noticing how they change every time he gets dispatched. His mother confirms, but claims they all look like Ars, which is quite sus. Ars checks his siblings' stats and notices how important they will become in the future. Suddenly, Reitz arrives claiming they could have found more talented people. A family of hunters have moved into their land, and the older brothers are getting praised by their skills. Ars decides to check it out the next day and prepares to leave with Reitz on a horse. Reitz explains the family lives in the woods, but Charlotte wants to know what he will do. Ars explains, and she decides to join them as Ars' escort because it's her off-duty day. Ars is having the comfiest horse ride, but Charlotte thinks this is taking too much time. Reitz explains it's her fault because she can't ride and they're forced to ride the same horse. Charlotte complains, mentioning that she and Ars are light and that Reitz should get off and run. He refuses to, because she's the one who insisted in coming with them. She claims that she wants to escort Ars, but Reitz insists that he's capable of doing anything by himself. They continue to argue, with Charlotte mentioning that she is the one who can protect Ars because of her real battle accomplishments. However, Ars notices that he's breaking up his comrades while looking for new ones. As they continue, they see a boar passing by but gets shot down by an arrow. They're impressed by what they just watched and notice the two mentioned siblings. The siblings compliment each other while calling out their competition. Reitz explains they must be the ones they're looking for. Upon noticing the group, the siblings apologize because they didn't notice them, and Ars uses his skill to check their stats. They're Gatos and Marcus and realize they're the ones they're looking for. Their prowess is around mid-60s, with Gatos having an A rank aptitude for infantry while Marcus has an A rank for archery. The siblings ask what they're doing there, and Ars tells them that he's here to request something. They take the group to their house and their father gives them a huge meal. The old man apologizes because it isn't much, but Charlotte starts digging in right away. She asks about what kind of meat is that, and Gatos explains it's the boar they caught earlier. He explains they're difficult to catch because they're small and fast, but they're delicious. Reitz, however, tells her to show some restraint because she's acting as an escort. The siblings' father then asks what Ars wants with them. Ars is direct and mentions he wants Gatos and Marcus to serve as soldiers for his family. Their father gets excited about it, and Ars mentions he could tell they're talented. Reitz adds that Ars is capable of noticing someone's talent, which increases the family happiness. The father mentions how they now can fulfill their dreams to become soldiers. The siblings promise to do their best, and he mentions how Ars is a lot more mature than his youngest son, Rosal, who is a similar age. Ars becomes curious and explains that his younger son is quite inept. At the same time, the same kid sneakily enters the room and takes a loaf of bread. Ars asks where Rosal is, and Charlotte asks if that's him. They all notice him, and the father tells him to stop sneaking without greeting the son's lord. The kid turns around and is clearly too shy to greet someone properly. Reitz notices how his hair is different compared to his brother's. Suddenly, Ars' ability activates, and he notices the small kid's huge potential. Not only his ingenuity can reach 109, but he also has several A-rank skills, plus an S-rank strategist. Ars can't even believe this ingenuity and thinks it's like a famous general who was reborn. He thinks Rosal is a monster and doubts that he will be able to find a higher stat in the whole empire. He knows that his stats are low because Rosal is only 5, but with proper training, he will become a brilliant retainer in the future. The father turns around and apologizes because Rosal is inept when compared to his brothers. However, Ars mentions right away that he also wants Rosal as his retainer. The family can't believe, and the father tries to stop it by mentioning that Rosal will bring trouble. Ars rejects it and personally invites Rosal to join him. Rosal questions himself, but Ars explains he knows that he has talent and asks to join. However, Rosal starts tearing down because he thinks they're just forcing him to fight in the future. He imagines Ars, Reitz, and Charlotte's scary faces ready to exploit him. Without a second thought, Rosal refuses to because he knows that he will die and runs away. Ars cannot believe he got rejected, but Reitz mentions he saw this before while looking at Charlotte. The father apologizes and mentions that Rosal probably won't agree because he's frail and timid when compared to his brothers. He explains that his mother passed away 2 years ago, and since then, Rosal has been isolating himself from everyone. Usually, the son of a hunter would be chopping wood and training with a bow by the age of 5. However, due to his lack of skills, he would probably struggle to survive, much less go to war. Yet, Ars tells him that Rosal's talent isn't meant to be a soldier like his brothers, because his talents would make him a great strategist. The father is confused but realizes that his son is clever and well-spoken. Ars believes that Rosal's intelligence will help them a lot and decides to get inside and ask him again. Upon getting inside, Rosal grabs his book and crawls against the wall. Ars apologizes for startling him and tries to apologize. He asks if Rosal likes books, who confirms it. He mentions that he only has that book, but his mother used to read it to him all the time. Ars feels bad about it, and Rosal explains that when he's reading, he can forget that he's bad at everything else. Despite feeling bad, Ars approaches him and asks if Rosal wants to visit his family's library. He confirms that they have several books and Rosal can take anything he wants. Rosal, however, tries to refuse because he thinks Ars will guilt-trip him to force him to anything he wants. Ars says no, because he thought that Rosal could enjoy reading different books. Since there's no catch, Rosal agrees on the condition that his brothers go with him. Ars agrees and takes the siblings to his house. Upon getting there, Rosal gets scared because a dog licks his face, but he thinks it's a ferocious beast who's going to eat him. Charlotte is tasked to show the older siblings around and introduces her as the captain of the Mage Corps. She's annoyed to do something but changes her mind when they praise her. Ars then uses this chance to bring Rosal to the library while revealing they have a copy of every book in the Empire. Rosal cannot close his mouth and starts looking at the bookshelves. Ars tells him to feel comfortable and reveals that he will leave for a bit because he still has his daily lessons. But turns out that Ars fell asleep after his classes and panics because he thinks that Rosal has left. He runs back to the library and notices Reitz taking care of Rosal. Reitz explains that Rosal was too excited and decided to read as much as possible, but in the end, he got tired and fell asleep. Reitz also reveals that he taught Rosal some words he didn't know, and he was quickly able to understand what they mean. Ars' ability activates and cannot believe that Rosal's ingenuity stat rose up by several points within hours. His siblings arrive to take him back home and are confused on how he can enjoy books if he can't even read. Ars is shocked, but they explain that hunters don't need reading skills. Rosal wakes up and Ars asks him how he learned to read. He explains that he remembers his mother reading to him when he was little, so he tried to match what she was saying to the words on the page until he was able to read it. Gatos is confused because Rosal was 3 at the time, but the young kid explains that he remembers everything since he was born. This shocks everyone, especially Ars, who realizes that Rosal is so talented to the point where he learned to read on his own. He cannot let such talent to go waste, but there's a problem: his family. Reitz proposes that they could let everyone know there's ways to hunt without a bow, which will also give Rosal some confidence. Therefore, Ars visits the hunter family the next day and tells the siblings to use traps instead of bows. They all get confused, but he explains that it's popular in other continents. Gatos doesn't think it will work because sewers are fast and smart animals and it shouldn't be possible. Ars, however, counters and holds Rosal's hands while mentioning that his real strength is his brain, and if he uses his brain, he will be able to create a trap that will force his father to acknowledge him. Rosal doesn't believe in himself, but his brothers cheer him up by telling they will help him. He decides to try it, and after some days, his father is shocked by a strange structure. His sons tell him to look inside, and he cannot believe the amount of sewers inside. They explain that Rosal made the trap and push him forward. The kid explains that he knew his father had to do all the hunting if his brothers became soldiers. Therefore, he read about the Soas behavior and made a trap based on it. The siblings also points to some herbs hanging on some tree, and Rosal explains that baby sowers and nursing mothers hate the smell of it. Therefore, babies and mothers will stay away from the trap. This way, preserving the balance with nature, just like his father wants. Upon looking around again, the father turns cold and tells his older sons leave the house and take Rosal with them. He then asks Ars to take care of Rosal. The old man walks away, which makes Rosal feel like he's being hated on. Rosal tries to walk away because he was told to leave, but Ars tells him to return back home because his father must have his reasons. At night, Rosal tells himself that his father hates him because his mother got sick after he was born. Later on, she died, and he believes that his family hates him and blame him for her death. That was the reason why he shut himself up on his room. He wishes he wasn't born and starts to try. Suddenly, he hears some noise outside. His siblings and father get to the roof, and the brothers try to avoid making noise while thanking his father for raising them. They all share a drink while his father tells him to thank their mother for it. Gatos then asks why his father was so cold when he spoke to Rosal, despite his efforts to impress him. Yet, the father simply tells the older brothers that Rosal should hate him. He explains that he was too harsh on Rosal and failed to notice his talent because he was focused on what he couldn't do. He thinks of himself as a failure of a father for not seeing his potential. Therefore, he wants Rosal to spend his life in a place where he can shine. The problem is that Rosal is kind like his mother and cares about their family. Therefore, the father decided to make Rosal hate and resent him, forcing him to leave. The father starts to cry and begs his sons to support Rosal and not fail like he did. Rosal is listening to their conversation and cries. The next day, Ars and Reitz come to pick up everyone, and Rosal ignores his father, deciding to leave without saying goodbye. His father is sad but decides to focus on cutting some wood. Rosal, however, gets closer and reveals that he could never hate his father. He confirms that he was useless at home, but he will learn under Ars and become a lot useful in the future. He starts crying and asks if they can live together again when that day comes. His father turns around, crying, and tells his youngest son that he will wait for him. The older siblings turn to Ars and thank him for taking their whole family as retainers. Ars, however, reveals that he only cares about the people who live on his domain and is happy to see their family bond restored. The three siblings then pledge loyalty and promise to become useful in the future.